My favorite line from Ken Burns' Baseball about him was he hired a guy to open his mail and throw away everything except checks and letters from broads.
History, I'd like to follow me down the rabbit hole. History, I'd like to, frankly, I want to know.
Hi, welcome to HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody. And the HILF up to bat is baseball, with my guest, comedy writer and baseball enthusiast, Joe Dungun. Now, like so many of the fuckable history subjects that my guests bring me to research, baseball has such a depth of jaw-dropping events and individuals that there is no way one episode, an entire podcast for that matter, could cover them all. So if, after you've listened, you find yourself, girl, hungry for even more from the annals of baseball history, go to our Instagram at HILF Podcast. Have I watched the new League of Their Own series on Amazon, for example? Yes, and I love it. You can go there to hear my review. But first, right now, join me and the velvet-voiced Joe Dungun as we go back to the origins of the game. Hear about when and where the very first baseball game was played, what happened to the real Shoeless Joe Jackson, all about Babe Ruth's insatiable appetite for sex, and that time Jackie Robinson was drafted for World War II. Oh, I know, we're really about to knock it out of the park. But let's not be too hasty. All right, like any good hill thing, we must start on first base. I am delighted that you are here.
Thank you.
Joe Dungun. I'm so glad that you've joined me, and we don't know each other.
No.
So I had to look you up, and I know that you are a comedian.
Sometimes.
You are an event host,
When I can get to work, yes.
and you are a comedy writer.
I consider myself all of those things and more. Getting people to pay me for it is another story. People ask me what I do for a living. I'm like, this week? I mean,
Sure, it's a quilt. It's a tapestry. We're weaving together.
Oh, mine's a pretty threadbare sheet, but thanks.
Well, what's the coolest job you've ever had?
Ooh, good question. I'll tell you what I loved when I was a kid. When I was a teenager, I was taking tickets for UCLA basketball games. Ooh. And I worked the door where the players came in. I knew Reggie Miller when he was a sophomore at UCLA.
That's cool. How did you get that job?
It's a guy I knew. He was a floor usher, and he got me in, and I was 16 when I started doing that. Yeah,
That's a cool job.
Yeah, and celebrities would walk in sometimes, and I was on the floor, nationally televised games once in a while because UCLA was a badass basketball team.
Fun.
Yeah, it was kind of cool.
And your friends were like, oh.
Some of them, yeah, most of them didn't care, but I thought that was just cool being there.
Yeah.
It's a cool atmosphere.
Joe, this is another cool thing about you is not only did we not know each other prior to this, but you hit me up. You were like, Miss Brody, I want to be HILFed.
Miss Brody.
You said, I think your podcast is great. I'd love to be on it. And baseball's my subject. Why?
Well, I probably know more about that than any other kind of history, for one thing. It's also a unique sliver. It's not like they talk about it in history class. And I mean, everyone talks about the Civil War and the Crusades and all that stuff. No one talks about, Babe Ruth and Jackie Robinson and all that stuff. So.
See, I think it's a damn shame. I do love baseball. I think because I'm from the Midwest and baseball is spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh,
well, you're from Minnesota, right? Mm-hmm. Well, of course, winter is just nightmare.
It's miserable. And
baseball accompanies warmer weather. And not only that, if your head is in the game, you can be fascinated for 3 consecutive hours.
It can give you whatever you're looking for. Totally. If you're into stats and math and technology.
Oh, yeah. That's another thing. I'm a math nerd, too.
Oh, see?
Yeah. Moneyball was another fascinating sliver of history that changed baseball. I'm not sure for the better, but changed baseball for sure.
For sure. And the number of times you hear baseball or missing baseball as an example of missing what's good in life, right? Somebody's bitching about their job. This goddamn job, I never had a chance to go to the baseball games. And you know what that means. It's not just you didn't get a chance to go to games. You missed an important part of your child's life because you know how important baseball is to your kid and that big game. And to miss baseball is like a capital crime, or to take baseball from someone is a truly offensive thing to do. And when you talked about the history of America, if I were teaching history class, In the history of America, I would teach the history of baseball. But just at the end of the class, I'd give them a quiz about American history and they'd fucking ace it. And they wouldn't know why. Because you can't separate baseball from American history.
There's definitely overlap.
It's overlap. But these two have held hands from the very beginning. I mean, it's such a fascinating story. And I'm so grateful to you, Joe Dungun, for bringing me this subject because I had an absolute blast HILFing this stuff. Let me tell you about my sources. Let me tell you about where I went to get a lot of this stuff.
Sure.
I went to Ken Burns' baseball documentary, PBS, 1994.
Yep.
This is 19 hours of Ken Burns doing his thing with the sound and the slow and the pictures. And oh my God, it was an absolute delight.
Wonderful.
If you really feel like this is just the tip and you want the whole thing, jump on in.
Yeah.
And by the way, you can go support PBS anyway.
That too.
Anyway. And then just countless articles, essays, portraits, and profiles, and some of the people and events that I'm going to talk about. It is an extensively written about topic. So after all of this, we consumed all this stuff. Here's my plan for the HILFing of baseball with you, Joe Dungun.
Yes.
I'm going to start with the origin of baseball. The first time the word baseball was whispered on American soil and when we got into it. And I'm going to sort of lily pad through some of the most interesting HILFs along the way, the individuals that curled my toes the most, which are Shoeless Joe Jackson, Babe Ruth, and Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
And so, are you ready to HILF?
I'm ready to HILF. No dinner, no dancing. We're just going to go straight to the HILFing?
I gave this poor guy some carbonated water and was like, buckle up. The legend of the birth of baseball is from 1849 in Cooperstown. And Cooperstown is 150-ish miles northwest of New York City. And there's a guy named Abner Doubleday. Do you know who this guy is?
Yeah, he was a Civil War general. He was a decorated general, actually. And as the story goes, I think some historian made it up decades later. He actually didn't know anything about the game. Yeah. But it just made good copy.
It did. Well, Abner Doubleday, they say in the legend, and of course, I mean, the name sounds great. Abner Doubleday. Who doesn't write a song about Abner Doubleday? That these guys are playing this game called Town Ball, and that they're playing, and it's kind of like stickball and cricket, and they're fucking up, and everybody's getting hit. Nobody agrees on what to do. They're running into each other, and every hit is fair, and it's chaos.
Yeah.
Until Abner Doubleday sits down with a pen and paper, goddammit, and writes down the rules to a game called baseball. And then he goes on to be the hero of Gettysburg. And as Joe said, years after he's dead, somebody says, he invented baseball. And everyone goes, that sounds great. But there's a reason why we wanted the story of Abner Doubleday to be true. And it's because the real story of the origin of baseball doesn't fit with the reason we've loved baseball since. The real origin of baseball in America started in a very, very prestigious, very elite, and very exclusive gentleman's club in New York City called the Knickerbocker Club. And it remains one of the most exclusive, prestigious, and difficult to access gentlemen's clubs in the entire world. This club in New York City was excluded membership to only a few families that were Dutch and British. I mean, John D. Rockefeller was reluctantly admitted into the Knickerbocker Club after his third application. And it wasn't until the third generation that a Rockefeller got into the inner sanctum of the Knickerbocker Club.
How aristocratic can he be? We're Rockefeller's G. We don't know.
Because he's new money.
Oh.
I mean, these guys, okay?
Oh.
And so there's a guy in the Knickerbocker Club named Alexander Joy Cartwright who just fucking loves baseball. This game that the kids are playing that already is called baseball, and he loves it. Whether or not he, like other rich, prestigious guys, saw money to be made and sort of establishing this game as something that could be controlled and regulated and whatever, is anybody's guess. But this guy comes up with the DNA, the beating heart, and the real skeletal structure of baseball. Here's what he does. He sits down and he gets some of the rules. For example, the infield is a diamond shape. Runners are now tagged out or thrown out. You don't just throw the ball out.
Yeah, you mentioned it's kind of barbaric.
Pretty
just
significant.
smack a guy in the head with a ball. No.
No,
Come
please
on.
no. Not at the Knickerbocker Club. And 3 missed swings is an out. Where the foul lines are. This game that Alexander Joy Cartwright sketches out is very unique to rounders in cricket, and it's their own game, and they love it, and they want to play around New York, but already they've broken too many windows.
Yeah, it's too big for a street.
I'm a mom. Okay, I know what happens to you when you see somebody with a ball and a stick in the house start to think of a game. You're like, get out of here, right? Take whatever it is you're thinking, you're going to go to New Jersey, right? Which is exactly what they did.
Yes, they went to Jersey, didn't they?
They went to Elysian Fields in Hoboken, and the Knickerbocker Club explained the rules of baseball to an existing cricket club, challenged them to a game, and they lost 23-1. This cricket team just smoked the Knickerbockers. But what really won that day is baseball. I mean, it was a cannon. It burst out upon New York and sent shards of baseball into everybody's heart. Within 5 years, you couldn't walk a block without hearing the crack of a bat in the city of New York. It was everywhere. And everyone's playing, Joe. Teachers are playing teachers. Nurses are playing nurses. The pipe fitters, the technicians, the undertakers. Everybody's got a baseball team, and they challenge you. And we start to come up with more sort of structure. 9 people on a team. The bases are 90 feet apart, right? And everyone, and it is just a wildfire.
Why do you suppose it caught on at that time?
I think there's a lot of new stuff that's happening, right about this time.
We're
establishing.
What decade are we talking?
This is about 1846, June 19th, 1846.
Oh, that's right. That's the very first.
Is the very first game between the Knickerbocker Club and this cricket club. And by 1852, you could go and get a bat at most stores. Like, there's people that are making money making bats. There's people that are making money making balls. There's not an official thing yet, but it's starting a budding business. And because these like not really corporations, but industries are playing each other, that spark of competition relating to capitalism is already there. So like, who's better? Who this mechanic's shop or this mechanic's shop? You can't say who's the better mechanic, but we can draw a line and say who's the better baseball player, you know? So everyone in America is playing. It's fantastic. And then the Civil War starts.
Oops.
And we continue to have everybody playing baseball. Both sides of the Civil War have their units playing baseball wherever and whenever they can. In the Ken Burns documentary, as he does, it's just slow motion pan of the Civil War trappings you're used to. Bunch of dirty ass, sad looking, toothless guys. You know what I mean? Laying in a field with some hat, and they're holding baseball bats, right? And it's God bless them.
Well, yeah, because also, trench warfare was just so boring. I mean, you think of war as hell, but most of it was boring. There's not a lot to do.
No.
So sure, let's line up and pick teams and let's get going. So that would make sense.
Sure, creates
absolutely.
camaraderie. What else are you going to do? It's not like you need a bunch of stuff. Yeah. And it also really solidified the game because after the war was over, these units of soldiers have been playing together for the last few years. And a lot of these units were delineated by geography anyway. So once they come home, this unit versus that unit, we'll come to you, you come to us. And baseball continues to travel and become more popular, and everybody's having a fantastic time. 1876. Give or take 10-ish years after the Civil War is over, we've got a professional baseball league.
That was the beginning of the National League, wasn't it?
Exactly. But right before that, in 1871, they had already established the Professional Baseball Players League. So you can imagine, if everyone's making this up, right? We're all the first ones doing this, and there's no organization, and you've got some players that are really good and really, quote-unquote, valuable. We want you to play on our team. How do we get you to come over and play on our team? We offer you shit, including money, right? Maybe we even hire you to work in our store so you can work on, so that you can work on our company and then be on our company team. I mean, this kind of stuff is already happening. And so the players are the first ones to set up a league, the Professional Baseball Players League. And by 1876, the owners and the managers are like, no, the players do not get to decide how this is going to go forward. And one of the first things that they do when these owners and managers get together in 1876 and create the National League is set boundaries on players, significant boundaries. One is on their behavior. They can't drink on or off the field. No games on Sundays.
That's
no
right.
No cursing.
Isn't that what gave rise to the American League, which was a lot looser with the rules?
Exactly right. Yeah. Well, actually, the first response was the Brotherhood because the players rejected it because the big needle, like the huge punch in the jaw with this National League to the players was the reserve clause.
Oh, that's a huge piece that overlaps labor history in this country,
really,
too.
Exactly right. So the reserve clause is introduced in this 1876 meeting with the owners and managers, and it's the big thing that pisses the players off because what it says is basically you players have no more control and no more power over how much you make or where you go after you've signed your contract with me. So the best 5 players on every team are reserved for that team. They have no choice. They cannot go to another team, even if they want to, and even if the other team wants them. If another team wants to hire one of my top 5 reserved players, they make an offer to me, the owner. And it is up to me, the owner, if I buy or sell that player. And I make the profit. Obviously, the players are looking at this and are like, I see. So I don't make any more money and I have no choice. Why would this be good to me? On the other hand, a lot of guys are like, this is the best possible job I'm ever going to have. My alternative to this was working in whatever factory I came from.
For another year.
For 1 year.
That's
exactly.
the thing.
No
And
long-term contracts because it's only 1 year at a time.
Yeah, and the owners can just can you whenever they want. So it's not real. How much security do you really have?
None. And so a bunch of players, including a bunch of star players, organized their own league, and they called it the Brotherhood, and it did really well for a while. And then the National League literally used words like, we're going to war, there will be no survivors. Like, they squelched that league fast. The American League did come up. That sort of rose out of the Midwest. And instead of competing with the American League, they saw this as a useful competition, and ultimately their competition at the end of the year is the World Series.
Yeah.
We know how that worked out. But the response from the players right away was resentment, and the line between owners and players was drawn and never really erased. And in 1877, 1 year after this is set up, they have their first cheating scandal.
Oh, was it that early?
It was Jim Devlin.
Yes, I remember that name. Yes.
Yeah, 1877. He's on a team called the Louisville Grays. They suspiciously lose to the Boston Red Caps. And there's an investigation. They find out they took a bunch of money from gamblers to throw the game. And the owners and managers realize right away that that is a huge threat to baseball. There will be no baseball if people don't believe their players are trying to win. But that's not the scandal, right?
Oh, no.
Because the scandal comes a few years later with our first HILF, Shoeless Joe
Yeah.
Jackson.
You know, it's interesting because these guys, you know, keep in mind, there was no disability insurance. There was no workman's comp.
No.
You were as replaceable as a flat tire.
Sure.
You can't play anymore. Goodbye. You're back to the coal mines or wherever you came from.
But which is egregious and exactly what they expected. There was no job. There was no other job that was offering anything like that. It wasn't like if you weren't a baseball player, you'd have all of this protection in the coal mine. You know, they were just like, yeah, this is how it works. Except here, it's great because I don't have to get down into a coal cart and women want to fuck me.
Yeah.
This is great.
do you think guys had women chasing them even back then playing baseball? Really?
Oh, come on. They're wearing a uniform. They make a bunch of money. Everybody wants to know them.
I guess, but they weren't famous. There was no radio. There was no,
But there was, because the fame then is word of mouth. That's one of the reasons why Shoeless Joe Jackson actually, they think, became so famous, was because it's whispered. It's that have you heard? And there's some newspapers are publishing scores of certain games. When did you first hear about the man, Shoeless Joe Jackson?
Oh, probably as a kid. I don't remember exactly when. I just know he was the sad case who, I think he's most tragic because he was probably the best player on that team.
He may have been one of the best players of all time. Even some of his stats still hold up. I first heard about Shoeless. I think a lot of people of my generation heard the same, which is the movie, Field of Dreams, which was based on a book called Shoeless Joe. He got suspended from baseball for allegedly participating in the gambling of the 1919 World Series, and how tragic and sad it was. And you used the word sad right away. It's like you can't separate this story from just heartbreak.
No, it is sad because what I've gathered from reading about it is that he didn't know what he was doing.
Most people agree with you.
He wasn't very bright. He just go along to get along kind of thing. And if he had known he was ruining his reputation and never play again, he wouldn't have. I don't think he would have participated.
No, Joe, I completely agree with you, and a lot of people do, and it makes sense because here, now for context, Shoeless Joe Jackson comes around about 30 years after the reserve clause and the National League has been established. So baseball is now a much more established thing. There are stadiums are being built. People are taking money, not huge stadiums like we know them now, stands, I guess is the more appropriate term, but there's money to be made. If I buy a piece of property and build stands, I will make a huge profit hosting baseball games. Baseball teams would get together and just travel around and challenge local teams to a game and then pass the hat. For whoever wanted to watch them play, to pitch it, it was sort of akin to like a carnival or a circus in that sense. And Shoeless Joe Jackson is born poor to sharecroppers in South Carolina, and at the age of 6, Joe, he goes to work in a textile factory.
Yeah,
this is part of the reason why he's completely illiterate. And he's at 13, he's drafted for the textile mills baseball team because, as I said, everybody's playing fucking baseball.
And if you can play at that age, you must be pretty good.
And they had to ask his mom's permission, and I don't know how they knew he was that good, but she was like, sure, he can play baseball. And he made a little extra money. He was making money playing baseball right away, and good. And I cannot emphasize enough, you guys, for you to know why Shoeless Joe's story is so sad, you have to know how fucking good he was. And the Shoeless Joe thing is in part because he was so poor. He was very unaccustomed to wearing new shoes, and new cleats are particularly tough. And after they started hurting his feet, he just took them off and continued to play incredibly well, even in his bare feet. But he started playing first professionally in 1908, and his rookie batting average of 408 still stands as the best rookie batting average of all time.
Oh, I'd heard that. Yeah.
It is still,
forget about that.
It's only second overall, aside from rookies, second overall to Ty Cobb. He went into the outfield at first because they started him pitching, and he broke a guy's arm with the ball. So they were like, okay.
And this is, keep in mind, this is back in the mushy ball era.
Yeah, the ball
was not wound tight like it is like a rock now. It was softer then. You break a guy's arm with a mushy ball, you're throwing pretty hard.
This guy knew what he was doing, right? He gets traded in 1915 to the Chicago White Sox. He kills it with them. In 1917, they win the World Series against the New York Giants. Then 1918, World War I starts, and he goes to work in the shipyards. He's not in combat. And when the war is over, he gets right back. So he comes back to baseball after World War I, 1919. They get all the way to the World Series, and the White Sox are facing off against the Cincinnati Reds, and they lose. What are you going to do?
Well.
And then shortly after they lose, everyone's like, well, this is very strange. And there's already been mumblings about, no, it just doesn't seem like they were playing as good as they possibly could.
Apparently it was obvious to people who were learned.
Apparently it was really obvious. And you know what's so fascinating is that the players had actually started out cheating much better. And then the gamblers just weren't convinced. They were actively trying to lose. So what happened was the gambler's name is Arnold Rothstein.
Oh, yeah. He a legendary figure. And referenced in The Great Gatsby, too.
Yeah, this
very
guy.
Casually.
And
He's the guy who threw the World Series. What?
I'm sorry, what?
A guy.
The
guy through the World Series. That shows you how little the players were being paid.
And how much they wanted to stick it to the managers.
Well, and that's another thing. If you watch the movie 8 Men Out, which is not a porn, by the way, the John Sayles movie.
I mean, you can find a porn version if you spend a few minutes.
Probably could. But they show what the climate was like back then. And it was such one-way contracts. They treated the players like shit. I mean, they did anyway, but it was especially egregious on the White Sox. There's a scene in that movie where one of the pitchers, I forgot who it was, goes into the owner's office and he says, how come I'm not starting? I mean, it's like there's a month of games left. I'm not starting. He goes, well, I just want to save your arm, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, is it because there's a clause in my contract saying that if I win 30 games, I get a bonus and I have 29 wins? No. It has nothing to do with that. Bullshit. Of course it did. Mm-hmm. And he deliberately held him out so he couldn't get that 30th win, so he couldn't make the money. And there's tons of stories like that.
There's tons of stories like that. And they didn't even try that hard to hide it from the players because anytime a player brought it up, they would just be told, go fuck yourself, and blacklisted. Not even you're kicked off the team. No owner in baseball will ever hire you again. And this guy's name, by the way, is Charles Comiskey. If you want to know the guy
Comiskey was the owner, yeah.
And that was why when this gambler, Arnold Rothstein, gets these guys in the room and basically makes the pitch, it was received with varying degrees of interest. Some of them were like, fuck yeah, for the money, because I want to screw over the owner, because this sounds great to me. It doesn't bother my moral code at all.
Near the end of my career, what are they going to do, blacklist me? I'm done anyway.
Exactly. And some who were like, yeah, I like the idea, but I can't. I won't be able to go to sleep at night. I'm kind of a good guy. But nobody snitched because of how much they hated the fucking owner. So there was no reason for them to stop this. If they were just going to choose not to participate in it, let it go. The problem, as I said, is they didn't play well enough to convince the fans they were trying to win. They didn't play badly enough to convince the gamblers that they were trying to lose.
It's something you don't consider when you go to throw a game. I mean, this stuff, now you're already knee deep. You can't just back out.
Yeah. And that's why the gamblers started to threaten them and threaten their families. Mm-hmm. So then they would really super look like they were trying to lose, which would make the fans and the people watching go fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And then they would stop getting paid. The gamblers stopped paying them. So then they started playing really well to stick it to the gamblers. Yep. It was a very
back and forth series
of that. It was all very, very confusing. And in any event, the investigation is launched very quickly after the series is over. And a grand jury comes together, and it's like 8 players and 5 gamblers. And at the end of the day, all the players are acquitted. and which is not the same as being found innocent, but they're acquitted of being, charged with these huge felony, whatever, fraud. However, the new commissioner of baseball.
Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
Can you think of a better name?
Yeah, it sounds like something out of some novel of, some dude who comes out of a forest who just chops your head off or something.
Kennesaw Mountain Landis. And as a woman who has named a child, you think, how are they going to walk into a room? My daughter is Beatrice Washington Melby.
Ooh.
I know, kick ass, right? Kennesaw Mountain Landis. You're like, listen up.
Who gives their kid the middle name Mountain?
Well, I guess Kennesaw Mountain was a place that was his family grew up, but it's a bold move.
But Kennesaw, I get. Hi, I'm Ken. Short for Kenneth? No, Kennesaw.
They were going to create a commission. They already knew this gambling thing is going to fuck up baseball. We've got a problem here. We got to sort this out. And so they're like, what we need to do is get like a Supreme Court for baseball. So let's just set up like a large commission of people. And Kennesaw Mountain Landis was like, that sounds fantastic. That's a great idea, except fuck a commission. It's all me. I'll be the commissioner. How's that sound? Kennesaw Mountain Landis delivered.
Yeah.
And even though all 8 of these baseball players were acquitted by a grand jury, he says, quote, regardless of verdict of juries, no player who throws a ball game, no player who undertakes or promises to throw a ball game, no player who sits in confidence with a bunch of crooked ball players and gamblers where the ways and means of throwing a game are discussed and does not promptly tell his club about it will ever play professional baseball. And girl, he wasn't fucking around.
That was the end of their careers right
All of
there.
them. All of them.
A day after they were acquitted.
If they were heard about it, literally, there were men who never attended a meeting and never took any money. But he simply knew they knew. And he blacklisted them from Major League Baseball for the rest of their careers. But here's what's interesting. We don't hear about those guys. Why do we focus on Shoeless Joe? Here's among the reasons why. One is that origin story I already told you. I want you to think about that. You're 6 in a factory you cannot read or write, and you not only find a thing that you do really, really well. You found a thing that you do really well and everybody loves you for it. It will pay you. You're not only really good at it, you might be the best in the entire world at it. And then poof.
Yeah.
And it's made sadder by the fact that there is no evidence that Shoeless Joe participated in this scheme in any way. He definitely was never in any of those meetings. No gambler and no player ever put Shoeless Joe in a room with them. He did sign a confession. This illiterate man who couldn't write his own name signed a confession. So what did he say? What did he write? Who knows? But he played beautifully. In every game of that series that he performed, there was no evidence that he did anything less than his best, and his best was his best. And at the games they lost, he played his best in the games that they lost. He did get $5,000.
See, there's the rub.
That's the rub. He got $5,000, but that money apparently was thrown at him by a teammate in a hotel room. Even just the money itself is questionable. The sad sack, he tried to get his job back. There was no way. He played under different names in minor league teams, but the minor league, they're not going to make the money. And once they found out it was him, which didn't take long, they wouldn't be associated with him. They didn't want to take the ire of Kennesaw Mountain Landis. And then one day, he and his wife are running a chain of liquor stores and bodegas, and he's sort of on the, behind the counter, trying to be obscure.
Yeah.
And a sports writer comes in with Ty Cobb, an old friend of his. Mm-hmm. And the bit, I'm sure, was just let's see what happens in here if these two friends, recognize each other or whatever. And Ty Cobb buys some things, checks out, and is about to leave because he didn't say anything. And he stops and he goes, "Joe, don't you recognize me?" And he says, "I know who you are, Ty. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to."
Yeah. Yeah.
Sad.
It's really sad.
He never had any kids, and he dies of a heart attack at 64.
Yeah, he was in the audience of the Ed Sullivan Show in the 50s. And somebody just, previous from the World Series, please stand up, Joe Jackson. I think by then, people had kind of forgiven him a generation later, if people even knew who he was. And then he died not long after that. Yeah. But that is really sad.
It's sad. And it's so and it's tragic. And it's also like, fuck you, Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
That's the other thing. It's especially the story with Ty Cobb, because Ty Cobb was one of the worst humans who ever played baseball. He was a raging racist and violently abusive. He just kept driving off his wives.
But that is not the problem for baseball. Baseball was under no threat from having a player that beat his wife. Baseball is under threat if the fans think they are wearing the player's number that is not playing for them. It was so, and then at the same time, as a lover of baseball, we couldn't have that cheat. It's so devastating for what it did to these individual players, but it had to be done. There would not have been the survival of this game if we had not truly believed that we were watching a straight game, and it had to be this brutal for it to happen.
Yeah.
But poor Shoeless Joe. I mean, I'd build a field for him.
It's too bad, but I'd like a story like this to address the problem at its root. Why are you treating players so shitty that they're willing to be corrupted so easily?
Sure. But I mean, but the argument goes so many ways. Like even in this same time period, frankly, the question was, what is the dollar amount that you have to pay someone to expect them to be good, right? Cops, for example. We started to realize that if we don't pay the police enough, under the prohibition, right, the gamblers and the bootleggers will simply make up the missing salary for those cops. And so we then look back on it and go, well, the cops were corrupt, but can you blame them? They were starving and they weren't getting paid enough. So where is the line and what is the dollar amount between just a guy trying to feed his family and somebody just taking a bribe and being a liar? And that line moves around. It moves around for us depending on who the individual was, what their job was, who they took the money from, what they took the money for. But I do think that we all agree that if somebody is being truly underpaid and if someone is being truly abused in their job, real or perceived, that they are ripe for corruption.
Oh, yeah.
Because a gambler, a really bad guy, can chew a cigar in your face and be like, I want to help you out.
Yeah, and Rothstein was pretty wicked. He was pretty shrewd. You could go to a hotel and there would be a guy on a phone or something phoning in what's going on to anybody who could sit in the room and listen. And the sign was, if the pitcher was in on the fix, he would hit the first batter. And there's a scene in 8 Men Out anyway where Rothstein is sitting there in this hotel room or this lobby or whatever listening to the game, and the first batter gets hit and he gets up and leaves. It's like, okay, I got game 2, got it, and he's just, or whatever, yeah.
And you can go place his bet.
Yeah, well, he already had his bet placed,
sure.
I'm sure, but he's got to make sure. Okay, game 2's in the bag, good.
And they were doing this. They weren't just doing it with baseball. These same individuals were doing it with the stock market and with horse racing and with every other thing that they could possibly influence and get inside information on. And it took various decades with varying degrees of success to weed out,
and they still struggle with it. I mean, that's the big argument nowadays with college sports.
Sure.
Pay college athletes; they won't be corrupted. There was a great story about about Boston College in the late 70s, early 80s, and the point shaving scandal of that. And these guys aren't getting paid, and Boston mob just go, hey, come here, I want to help you out.
Yeah, totally.
You want $500? No, you still win the game, but you don't win by 6, you win by 2, so we can get a bet down.
Right.
Like, come on, you can do that.
And this kind of money too, it's so tricky because they say exactly right. The one side says we pay these college athletes money, then they can't be bribed and corrupted. On the other hand, you say if you pay them so much money, they have no actual freedom to pursue any other interest. I mean, if these are college athletes, how do they accurately predict how their lives are going to go if this professional thing ever ends? And then they go, exactly. If they don't pursue it professionally, now they've saved up a little money from their. I mean, what is a dollar amount and how is it going to motivate a person is, I think, akin to astrology. In terms of who can actually predict, I've given you all this money, you now owe me a favor. I've given you all this money, you're now free to do whatever you want. That depends on you and me and all of these other factors that are going to come into play.
Oh, yeah. It's so messy.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson,
oh, yeah,
and so much more.
Hey there, folks. Wisconsin Drunken History Podcast is your weekly dose of the Dairy State. All things Wisco, with your hosts, Eric.
And I'm Russ. Be sure to tune in each week to learn more about the state we call home. We feature Wisconsin history, music, culture, and of course, beer.
me, before we slide into home with Joe Dungun, a humble-ish request to show us some love in all the ways that podcasts love. Reviews, baby. Ratings, subscriptions, shares, tell your friends. I mean, it really gets our algorithms hot when you...
Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow.
Joe Dungun, I have a question for you.
Certainly.
What is your favorite baseball movie?
Oh, gosh. I've never thought about it. I remember liking The Natural. I thought that was very good. I'm going to forget something. On the drive home, I'm going to go, oh, wait, edit this in.
Do you want me to give you some lists you can
Yeah,
jump in?
if you have.
I got League of Their Own,
Oh, yeah, that was a
Field of
great one.
Dreams, The Sandlot,
Yeah, I never saw The Sandlot.
Bad News Bears.
Oh, there you go. That's it.
Is that the one?
That's it. Bad News Bears is my favorite baseball movie.
That one came to me too as I was making my list, and I was like, I cannot leave out Bad News Bears. What about Major League?
I've never seen the Major League Series.
What?
I haven't.
Oh, those are
I probably
fun.
should. Bad News Bears is my favorite, though. I mean, for a lot of reasons. Number one, casting Walter Matthau opposite children is already a genius move. And number two, it might have been the first movie that ever showed kids at their rotten normalcy.
Yeah.
Because when kids are left alone, they're little pricks.
They're little pricks.
And it showed that.
And
They were shitty to each other.
And the what baseball as a community builder is. It's just this magnet for all sorts of different kinds of people.
And
right?
the coaches, I played Little League as a kid, not much, but I umpired briefly. That's
You were an ump?
that's a brutal job.
You were an ump for Little League?
I was an ump for a Little League a very brief period in college, and I quit. I'm like, I can't do this.
Did they kick dirt on you and treat you like garbage?
Yeah, they didn't kick dirt on me, but it's like some games are just harder than others. First of all, doing that job is incredibly hard. It's very easy on television, but it's very hard. And standing behind a catcher is oddly a terrible place to call balls and strikes.
That's
it's
why
really
they're
hard.
dressed up like a fire hydrant.
Well, it's not just the protection, but you can't see it that well. You really can't. It's so strange. I'm hovering right over this catcher, and I just feel like a perv just standing over this 12-year-old, like breathing on his ear.
Have there ever been I didn't see any of this in my research. Has there ever been a big cheating scandal involving umpires?
Not to my knowledge. I know there were some bad umpires. There's a guy right now who's a professional umpire named Angel Hernandez that everybody hates. Because now, with technology the way it is, you can electronically call balls and strikes. I mean, it's not official, but you can see it afterwards.
So do you think that we will ever do away with an umpire if we know that it's sort of...
It's possible because they're already.
Or they would advise they would be secondary to the technology instead of.
Yeah, it's already possible. I mean, first look at instant replay.
Sure.
They were already second question. I mean, in the old days, if an umpire got a call wrong, well, that was that. You can scream all you want. Now there's instant replay, and they can reverse their own calls.
Yeah.
I think umpires with integrity are going, let's get the game, let's get the call right.
Yeah.
And if you have to, go back and watch the video, I'm human. I get a call wrong once in a while. So give them points for that. I don't know if it'll entirely go away. Maybe it will. I mean, if you look at like wiffle ball championships, there is no umpire for the strike zone. You have to hit a box.
And who can look away from the wiffle ball championship?
Have you ever seen a good wiffle ball pitcher?
No, I've never. I don't know if I could have seen any kind of wiffle ball pitcher. Sell me on wiffle ball because I was okay. I remember being okay at that.
It's the way they can pitch now, because if you can throw like a good knuckleball with a wiffle ball, it can move 4 times on the way up there.
I didn't know. Okay, this is how bad I was. I've only ever hit a wiffle ball off a stand, so I didn't even know you pitched. In wiffle.
Oh yeah. But if you can throw it right, like a knuckleball, the idea with a knuckleball, and they call it that because your knuckles are sticking out, because you don't grip it like a baseball typically. You push it off with your fingertips, and the idea is to push it off with your fingertips with no spin, because then it will move very erratically on the way there. Now imagine that with this little plastic ball that weighs half an ounce, has a bunch of holes in it. It zigzags. I've seen it. It looks like special effects.
Fun.
Like a really good wiffle ball pitcher. It's unhittable.
I'd go to see a wiffle ball
it's
game.
stunning.
Where do they play wiffle ball around here?
I don't know. I'm sure it happens here and there, but
I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna find me a wiffle ball game. One of my favorite baseball movies of all time is The Sandlot. It's got that youthful team, goofy. James Earl Jones is in it. He's in all the good baseball movies. But they talk about the Bambino and Babe Ruth. And part of the plot line of The Sandlot is just the adoration that is given to the man Babe Ruth. And I don't think I could have told the history of baseball without at least mentioning him. And
Absolutely not.
But one of the things with Babe Ruth's origin, and one of the reasons why he sticks to this history so much and why we love him so much, in addition to how fucking good he was, is his origin, similar to Shoeless Joe Jackson, is the American story. It's the kid from nowhere, the kid with no dad. And in Babe Ruth's instance, he grew up in a boys' home in Baltimore.
His parents put him there. He wasn't an orphan.
No, he wasn't an orphan.
They couldn't control him. I mean, that's talk about bad parenting. We're like, fuck it, let the city take over.
Well, you know what? It's interesting you say they couldn't control him. He was abandoned. I mean, they were never around, but was part of it. I mean, they were both working. This is part of the deal with being poor. But it wasn't as if he had parents that had the ability to control him either. But there was one guy, once he gets to this Baltimore boys' home, brother Matthias Boutier, who legendarily introduces him to baseball, teaches him all the ins and outs, and he's so good. He's just from,
He was apparently a natural. He was 8. He was 8. He was playing with the 12-year-olds. When he was 12, he was on the high school team. Yeah. Apparently just had a natural knack for it.
And his first pro opportunities at the age of 19 for?
Baltimore, wasn't it?
Boston Red Sox.
Oh, he played for an amateur team in Baltimore first.
That was his first MLB, and he's 19. He goes into town to do his tryout for the Boston Red Sox. Apparently, he meets his wife, his future wife, that day.
Yeah.
She's a waitress in the restaurant across the street. And he starts off as a pitcher, and he's so fucking good as a pitcher. But he doesn't like it because you have to take days off.
Yeah, even then, as a starting pitcher, there was a rotation, so you didn't just play every day. But he did. I think for a time he played outfield in the other days too.
They did put him in the outfield first. That was where he was for the early, because he wanted to keep working every day. Then World War I, 1918, his draft is deferred, and he works in a steel mill and plays baseball for the mill. And then 1919, which of course is the year we already talked about, the year that the White Sox throw the World Series. They realize that they're not going to clear the championships, so they let Babe Ruth hit. In 1919, the fuck he can hit. Holy shit, he can hit. Home run. He is setting records, and the crowds love him. The crowds right away, that crack, that sound, the thing that sends you to your feet, and people start coming in record numbers to see him break records. And at the end of that season, with this incredible realization that this guy can hit and he can get crazy home runs, and the entire city of Boston is completely fallen in love with him, they, of course, sell him.
Yes, that is the lament of Boston fans to this day.
To this day, even though the curse of the Bambino.
They call it the curse of the Bambino. I don't sucks. It wasn't just a tragic tale of them not being able to win the World Series. It's the way they didn't win the World Series, because there were repeated instances where they came very close, only to break their fans' hearts.
Well, that's why it has to be a curse. I mean, it's not the curse of the Bambino
Right.
if you don't get your heart
but
broken.
my theory is it's not so much the Bambino as it is the fans, the collective unconscious of people who are afraid of something bad happening. Because if you look at 1978, for example, they had a meltdown. They were ahead. The Yankees were the defending world champions, and they started 1978 in total disarray because they were the Yankees, and it was the Bronx Zoo, as people called it. And the Red Sox had something like a 14-game lead, and that summer it completely evaporated. They flipped the script, both teams, and it turned into a one-game playoff at the end of 1970. And then there's 1986, where they were up 3-2. They were 1 out away from winning in New York, and then it all unraveled. And the Mets won that game, and they won Game 7 also.
And your theory is that there is some invisible, universal tendril that is connected somehow to the beating hearts of the fans, and the breath, and the expectation, and the hope, and then the fear, and then...
The guy who made the final play in order to lose Game 6 was Bill Buckner, the late Bill Buckner. He was a very good first baseman, and his career is forever stained with this unfortunate moment. Years later, someone unearthed an interview of him 2 weeks before that game. And he said, well, obviously the big fear is to, make the error at the end of a game that loses the game in the World Series. And that's what he did.
Yeah.
He put the energy out in the universe.
Well, and this is, if I'm not mistaken, baseball players are uniquely superstitious.
Oh, yeah.
They seem like this theory coming from you, Joe, is not just there is a real belief in and among the biggest players in baseball and forever. Don't wash your socks and all this touching their bodies and all the OCD stuff they got to do, to get themselves right.
There's a great book called The Baseball Codes, which talks all about stuff like that, like when it's okay to hit a batter and brush him back, when it's the superstitions and all that stuff. And the best one is there's a statue of a Civil War general in Chicago. All the buses go by this statue because it's near the hotels where the players stay. And the theory goes that if you were on a hot streak, you do not look at the balls of the horse when you're going by. Conversely, if you're on a slump, hey, Larry, you want to break your slump? You got to look at the balls.
I got some balls for you to look at here.
This horse. The horse is apparently with one leg up, and you can see the jewels of this horse right there.
I love this about this. I think that like as we talk about what there is to love about baseball, we talked at the beginning. You love the math, you love the drama, you can love just sitting out and enjoying the game, you can love the technology, you can love the capitalism, you can love the whatever. And another thing is the mysticism of baseball.
I don't think it's a coincidence. The Red Sox, when they finally won the World Series in 2004, it was on the road because they were away from their fans.
Have you ever, though, been around a bunch of people from Boston and felt good?
Fair question.
The Red Sox, who had won 5 out of the first 15 World Series, didn't even go to the World Series again until 1946 and didn't win the thing until 2004. And to make matters worse, at least for the people who were around at the time that Babe Ruth left, when he gets to the Yankees, he fully blooms into the rose that is Babe Ruth. I mean, he saves baseball. I want to remind you again that the 1919 World Series broke our hearts. And we are also sad for Joe Jackson. And what the fuck is going on with baseball? And are we going to lose baseball? And am I ever going to love baseball again? Fans are asking themselves, can I love baseball again? Can I walk into a stadium and not hate these fucking assholes? And will I be able to go and wonder if they're actually a bunch of cheats instead of the heroes to look up to? And I just don't know if I'm capable of the crack. What was that sound? And it's Babe Ruth. And he's fat as fuck.
Yeah.
He's dumpy. He looks fatter than you. You think to yourself, I can fucking do that.
Yep.
You watch Babe Ruth. And he not only is hitting these home runs, Joe, he hits the first ball out of the park since Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I'm getting goosebumps right now. A literal coming back. People could... and so the crowds come back. He sets a record. He breaks that record. He sets the record again. He breaks it again. Not only do people realize they can love baseball again, they love it with a deepness and a fullness that they hadn't experienced before because they almost lost it, because she was almost gone. And he's helped by something you mentioned earlier, that new ball.
Yes.
The AJ Reach Company brings us a brand new baseball, and we enter the live ball era. In that very first year, there are 180 more home runs than in the previous season.
And that's when they realized, wait, home runs are more fun.
Yeah, this makes that sound. Every jump.
Yeah, it's a sound. The old home runs were, the ball would just kind of roll into the weeds, and you have to chase it down. This thing went flying. It defied physics.
Yes.
You've never seen anything travel 400 feet
and you
before.
got to watch with your mouth open. You spill your popcorn. So exciting. And Babe Ruth is a brute. He's really good, but he drinks hard.
Oh, and he
never
smokes cigars.
gets. He smokes cigars. He lost $35,000 betting on horses in Havana. He's a womanizer. You asked if they were
womanizer. He did all alpha male. He's all id. I want that. Eat.
And he'd said, he said in an interview, he said they can take my money, they can take baseball, they can take booze from me, but never women. They're just too much fun.
It sounds like something he would say.
He said he punched an ump. He would accost fans if they treated him like shit. He heard something he didn't like from the fans. He'd climb up on a wall and call you a piece of shit.
Oh yeah, he didn't realize he didn't. The idea of being elevated from that never entered his head. He was just all in the moment. And my favorite line from Ken Burns' baseball about him was he hired a guy to open his mail and throw away everything except checks and letters from broads.
Amen, babe.
Yep.
In 1930, he's the highest paid player ever. He's making $80,000 in baseball. And check this, $100,000 that year in vaudeville.
Oh, really?
This is 1930, which is the year the stock market crashes in 1929. I mean, everyone's rolling through a pile of dust and bones, except for Babe Ruth, who's just tits deep in pussy and cash. He's doing everything. And Babe Ruth, I mean, I know that I could do a whole episode on Babe Ruth. I wish I could, but the one that gets, the goosebumps on me is that called shot.
Which is, there's still legends about whether or not it actually happened.
It's true. I was reading about it, and every now and again they'd say he allegedly pointed to the blah, 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 blah. But the way it fills our hearts, what it did for people in that 1932, it was the 1932 World Series. It was versus the Cubs, and the Cubs' previous manager was now managing the Yankees. And that just is enough for the Cubs fans to be a bunch of cunts. And they've been yelling at everybody since they got off the train, calling names, throwing lemons at Babe Ruth, and just generally it's bad feeling. Fuck these guys, right? And the pitcher is
Charlie Root.
And interestingly enough, at this game, where the called shot game, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the then governor of New York and candidate for president, watched this game, which I thought was very cool. So Babe Ruth drives up to the plate, and in the midst of all this abuse and lemon throwing, allegedly points out to the back wall in a way that indicates that's where my next fucking ball's gonna go. Oh, the audacity.
Yeah.
And he hit.
And then he does it.
And then he fucking does it. Because you can't point like that with your big old dick hanging out and your cocky ass smile and then miss the fucking thing like that. Not with any grace. And then the next game, this Guy Bush, hits Babe Ruth with the ball. And this then instigates a rally on the Yankees, and they
they
win.
swept the series that year.
And they win.
And I don't know if he'd called a shot or not.
Why not? Why not?
Well, as the pitcher said, if he had called a shot, I would have knocked him on his ass. Pitchers don't take kindly to that sort of thing.
No, I think that's why it's so audacious to have done it. Like, can you believe this asshole? And everyone went, oh, that asshole. Ugh, can you believe that asshole? And he can't lose. This called shot happens in 1932. By 1934, 2 years later, this guy, his body hurts. That's a lot of
39.
You gotta haul that carcass around. It takes forever. He's not treating himself well. And he really wants to manage. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, and I think it's exactly what I outlined before, he's a brute, he's a womanizer, he's a cigar chewer. We may like that in a player that's hitting balls out of the park every night, but do we want this guy in the boardroom? Do we want this guy sitting behind the desk and talking to people's contracts? For whatever reason, they just didn't feel comfortable with it, and he never got the manager offer he wanted. The Yankees pretty much said, it's not going to happen. Forget it. And when he tried to look at other opportunities, actually, he did have some fairly serious offers, but he traveled around the world with his wife instead, went to Hawaii, went to the UK, tried cricket, hit the first time he tried cricket. Babe Ruth goes to the UK, tries cricket. This is like 1935. Hits it so hard, he destroys the bat. The bat just disintegrates in his hands. They're kind of stoked, and there's a very brief, who knows how serious they discussed him playing cricket, right? I know. He's like, oh, it can be great. They're like, oh, yeah, you'll love it. You get $40 a week.
Oh,
and he was
God.
like, good day.
Do I get, are there women? Are English women just as good as American women?
Oh, no, they would never blow you with their mouths.
Oh, forget
Certainly
it.
not.
No, I'm out of here.
No. He does get cancer.
Yeah.
And they don't tell him he has cancer, which I think is interesting. There was actually an article I was reading, and they said he didn't know. And I thought, well, he knows there's something up, but they didn't call it cancer. And perhaps he had requested, don't tell me what it is. And he had written a book, ghostwritten, the Babe Ruth story, that was being made into a movie in 1948. Once they realized that Babe was dying, they kind of hurried up this movie. And he saw the premiere in July. On July 26th in 1948, they got him out of the hospital, and he actually saw the premiere. And he died less than a month later, about 3 weeks later. He died in his sleep at the age of 53. And the people who saw this movie said it was, quote, the worst movie ever made.
I heard it was very cheesy.
I did read. I tried to find some clips of it. They're hard to find. The poster looks bad. I'll tell you that. The poster looks bad. And the description was there's a weird plot where he saves people from a burning fire. I mean, it's it does sound.
I heard it was cheesy. I did hear one story. I don't know the details, but the actor who played him was a guy named William Bendix, who apparently years earlier was a bat boy for the Yankees.
Oh.
And actually it got fired because he almost killed Babe Ruth one day.
Huh?
I forgot how. I don't know if he accidentally poisoned him or
that
what.
Movie actually killed him. I mean, he saw your movie and then he died 3 weeks later. So maybe this was all a long con to get him done. But they say, and you say he's the best. I mean, you look at the numbers, you think he's the best that ever was. And there is a guy playing right now on the LA Angels Shohei Ohtani from Japan, and he is a
Yeah.
hitter and a pitcher. And there are many, many voices, very important voices in baseball that are saying this guy is not just the next Babe Ruth. He's better than Babe Ruth.
We shall see.
And perhaps no player has been more discussed than the next one that we're going to talk about, Jackie Robinson.
Yeah, not just a great ball player, but a great American.
1919 is the year Jackie Robinson is born. This is, of course, the year of the World Series that was thrown by Shoeless Joe. It is the year that they first let Babe Ruth hit. Of course, you already know this. I cannot imagine any of my listeners have never heard of Jackie Robinson before, but he is the first black major league ball player. He, quote unquote, broke the color barrier in 1947 for the Dodgers. And there were, however, black baseball players, professional baseball players, before Jackie Robinson. It was a surprise to me to learn that at the very, very beginning, 1870, before this owners, managers versus players thing set up, there were professional black baseball players playing on integrated teams across the United States. Moses Fleetwood Walker, who was making his money as a baseball player, and then the league, they just decided,
It was a gentleman's agreement that came along.
we're just not going to hire black players anymore. It causes too many problems. And it was, name it. There were players that would not play with a black player. There are players that would not play against a team that included black player. The stadiums would lock the doors and not let anyone in to see the game. There are fans that would hurl abuse. I mean, some of the treatment is as egregious as the egregious treatment of black Americans in this country from the beginning, and it happened on and off the field. And the managers and the owners phrased it in this, of course, way that was it's causing too many problems. So to solve the problem, we're just going to kick all these black players off the teams and never hire any of them again.
But as history has shown, these problems tend to fester. And a few things happened. Number one, World War II ended. And if another thing in this country's history is whenever a war ends, black Americans demand civil rights because they just fought for this country and they come back and they're being treated the way they were before. They're going, no, I kind of have a problem with this. I just risked my life for your country and now I'm back to Jim Crow. No, I don't like this. And the other thing that happened is that Kennesaw Mountain Landis died.
Right.
He was a racist on top of his other qualities. And he died and he was replaced by a guy named Happy Chandler, who was a happy guy.
Happy Chandler, what do you know?
Some reporter, I think it was a black reporter from one of the black newspapers, asked him, how would you feel about a black major league player? And he kind of said, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
And everyone went, wait, what?
The year that Babe Ruth calls his shot, Jackie Robinson is 13 years old. He's being raised in Pasadena. He's got brothers. His brothers are in athletics. His older brother, Mac, in fact, got a silver medal in the 1936 Olympics. That'd be the Nazi Olympics when Jesse Owens wins 4 gold medals. And they encouraged him to pursue sports, and they kind of kept him on the straight and narrow. During World War II, he's drafted. He is then assigned to the Black Panther Tank Battalion and is going to be deployed to World War II. He goes to a doctor's appointment to get an old basketball injury looked at. On the way home from this doctor's appointment, he gets on a segregated bus. The driver asks him to get off the bus. He says no. The driver doesn't give him any grief, but when they get to the stop where they're going, he has called ahead, and the MPs are there, and there's authorities there, and he is court-martialed. He defends himself. His defense is sturdy enough that he is acquitted, stays in the military as a coach. He coaches athletics, and is ultimately honorably discharged in 1944.
And that was part of the criteria for figuring out which Negro League player they were going to pick.
It's a curiosity why they didn't go with this guy named Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson was statistically a better player than Jackie Robinson. And if they were just going for the best player, then why didn't they go for him? And the answer is this story.
They wanted the proper temperament.
And they said, there is going to be inevitable, painful, and incessant racism aimed at you and your family from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah. And
how are you going to roll with that?
There was that famous moment. They recreated it in the movie 42 with Chadwick Boseman and Harrison Ford played Branch Rickey. And, there's, how do you feel about fighting? And Robinson immediately got his back up and he said, what do you think? I'm afraid to fight? He says, no. I want to see if you have the courage not to fight. And then he gets to stop and go, oh, wait, really?
He comes to the Dodgers. His first game is played on April 11th, 1947 at Ebbets Field. It is versus the Yankees. There are 24,000 fans there. 14,000 of them are black. And there's already some painful experiences from players on his own team. They're starting rumors. We're going to boycott. We're going to strike. We're not going to play. And one of the Dodgers managers, Leo DeRocher, says, quote, "I do not care if the guy is yellow or black or if he has stripes like a fucking zebra. I'm the manager of this team, and I say he plays. What's more, I say he can make us all rich. And if you cannot use the money, I'll see you all get traded."
Yeah.
Did it put an end to the abuse that was leveled against Jackie Robinson? No. He got a 7-inch gash on his leg from an opposing player named Enos Slaughter.
Enos Slaughter is another prick.
Piece of shit.
Yeah.
In 1950, 3 years later, he is the highest paid Dodger. He's making $35,000. He plays himself in the Jackie Robinson story, which I watched. It's not that bad. It's not that good.
No.
But have you ever seen a baseball player be better? Playing Jackie Robinson.
No,
Just
right.
kidding. No, I mean, it was good. There were really lovely scenes, and he's not that bad. His voice is a little sweet.
Yeah.
He has kind of a sweet, high-pitched voice that has always been the thing for film, always is the sound of your voice, but it's not that bad. It's not as bad as the Babe Ruth story. It didn't literally kill him. And it got some good press. But Branch Rickey, his buddy and advocate, and like the guy who went looking for him, gets squeezed out of the Dodgers by Walter O'Malley, and it's bad blood.
Yeah, O'Malley is another example of behind every great fortune is a great crime. He was a prick.
Oh, Walter O'Malley is ultimately the one who brings the Dodgers to L.A., and to do so just has to fuck a lot of people over. But he's now in charge, and he calls Jackie Robinson Ricky's prima donna. And, just Robinson knows this is not going to be nearly as much fun. But he is starting to advocate more, not only for himself, but he's active in civil rights. He's openly calling out hotels and restaurants that treat him and his family and his friends badly. He stands up for himself and he stands up for others. And he's getting death threats and appears to change his behavior outwardly, not at all. In 1955... the Dodgers.
Oh, there it was.
There it was.
At long last.
At long last.
The Brooklyn Dodgers finally won a World Series.
And the Brooklyn Dodgers were shit. They were like, for years, it was the joke team. They were so bad. They never had anything good. And the Yankees are always the best. They're always fighting for the best. They're one of the best. They're second best. And the Dodgers beat the fucking Yankees. Oh, what a fantastic. Robinson didn't play his best game. He was not like the star player of that game, but it doesn't matter.
No,
You're a Dodger
they
when
finally
you beat the
knocked out the
Yankees.
Yankees.
And then in 1956, they get to the World Series, but he strikes out, and then it looks like, okay, the Dodgers are going to sell Jackie Robinson to the
Giants.
What?
No, not
Don't
the
say
Giants.
it again. Don't say not the Giants.
Come on.
So the Yankees would have been painful, but at least you get like, yeah, right, because these are the competitive. You're the best, and you think I'm the best, and you think I want to be the best. No, the Giants.
The arch enemy.
How dare you?
Yeah.
And but joke's on them, because secretly, Jackie Robinson had arranged to cancel his contract, and go work for.
Chock full of nuts, wasn't
Can you believe it? Chock full of nuts.
He worked for Chock full of nuts coffee.
The coffee company. He becomes an executive for Chock full of nuts. And even better, there was this parting kick in the shins too, because he had already arranged for a big release with Chock full of nuts, so that when his retirement and like leaving was announced, it didn't come through. And the MLB sources didn't get to break the story. Like, screw you.
Good for him.
Yeah, and he made his money and lived his life, and unfortunately, it wasn't a long life. He has heart disease and diabetes, and dies of a heart attack in 1972 at the age of 53. Many of his teammates are pallbearers. Jesse Jackson gives his eulogy. And 1 year later, in 1957, Wally O'Malley takes the Dodgers out of New York to Los Angeles.
A few things about that. Number one, why Ricky chose, or the Dodgers chose to break the color barrier. Yes, it's about money, because they're thinking cynically, if we get the first black player, every black person with a radio is going to be a fan of the Dodgers, But at the same time, all the owners wanted money. Did they do it? No. So there's a certain, both things are going on. Yes, it's greed, but it's also a sense of decency. And Ricky, the stories about Ricky are that he was actually a decent guy.
And this is yet another example of why baseball is the history of America. Why you can take labor relations, race, capitalism, you can take it all and find your place in which baseball has woven itself through it. It's so fascinating.
Oh, it's stunning. And it's just endless.
Well, Joe Dungun, you have been a wonderful guest. I am so grateful that you came, and I'm so grateful that you set my HILF target on baseball, because it was a true delight.
Oh, there's more.
There's more. Will you come back?
Oh, yeah.
And we'll do the 57 to present.
You got it.
Version of the baseball history.
Oh, there's so much to talk about.
Joe Dungun, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks again to my guest, Joe Dungun. Go follow him and watch out for him out there on all those wild wiffle ball courts. We have a new episode every 2 weeks, and up next, Pompeii, the ancient Mediterranean city annihilated by a volcano in 78 AD. And my guest is my real-life HILF, my husband, Andrew Melby, with whom I just visited the historic site. It was hot as fuck, and there was a snack shop in the middle, and cats, real cats everywhere. I have so much to tell you, and I can't wait for you to hear it. In the meantime, our theme song was composed and performed by Kat Perkins and Eric Warner. And a reminder that you can find my sources, links to the books, the documentaries, the articles that I reference in the summary of this episode, or by emailing us, hilfpodcast@gmail.com, or messaging us on social media @HILF Podcast. This has been HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody, reminding you that history is a party, and everybody's coming.